Hello, my friends. Today's video is per special request from one of my artists. She wanted me to go over some tips for the first time as a singer you're going to a band practice. Because as she learned very quickly, it's really different than just showing up and singing with a track or playing your little acoustic guitar or piano. It's very different playing with a band. Musicians are used to it, and so you just kind of figure it out as they play together, as they jam together. But a singer usually doesn't go to their first band practice until they've been singing for a while. But again, it's so different transitioning from singing to a track to singing with a band. So I put together just a few tips for you. My name is Becky. This is the Empowered Indie Artists YouTube channel and podcast. I hope you like these. If you do, please subscribe, please like, tell your friends. I love giving out amazing information. And also, I have a freebie for you. I've got the artist branding workbook that artists tell me they go through it and it's like life changing. I hope you'll grab it. It's totally free. The link is in the description. So let's get to it. Tip number one, study the music really, really well and take note of specific cues and counting how many bars. What a lot of singers will do is they're used to listening to an instrumental track or singing with a track, and it's predictable. It's always the same. You're hearing some little string line and you kind of get used to that as your cue. But what if your keyboardist doesn't have the string part down exactly right, or you don't even have a keyboardist? So just taking note of how many counts before you come in, specific things that you should listen for, but also knowing how many counts will give you kind of that backup plan so that you're not dependent on the cues, but also know when a cue is missing. As a band leader, which you might be or you might not, it's good to also know if, like, oh, there's supposed to be a drum fill there and your drummer didn't do the drum fill, or there's a specific guitar part. So start listening really carefully to the music itself. If it's a cover band that you're in, especially, you're really going to want to know these songs like the back of your hand. If you're in a band where it's more of an original band and it's living and breathing, then make sure you're recording these rehearsals so that if you nail something and you really like the way it feels, you know how to replicate it. Okay, tip number two, hearing yourself properly is your number one priority. Now, this is really tricky because oftentimes you are stepping into a group of musicians that have already been jamming together, and musicians already think of singers a little bit like, oh, they're a separate breed. So you're going to feel a little bit like you're being a diva. You can be very nice about it. You don't have to act like a diva, but just remind them that hearing yourself will keep you from burning out your voice or blowing out your voice or getting tired too quickly. And it's very loud usually with a drummer and electric guitars, especially drummers. They don't have a volume knob. They do have tools that will help them play a little bit softer, as far as like when they hit, they can play a little softer or a little lighter, but they also have specific types of drums that aren't as loud or types of sticks that aren't as loud, but still they're going to be loud. And your electric guitar player is playing through an amp most likely, and a lot of times your bass player is playing through a pretty big speaker. You are competing against that. So if you don't hear yourself well, you are going to find yourself getting hoarse after about 30 minutes. Make sure that you have a monitor or a speaker pointing right at you, or if you are in a situation where your PA system has in-ear monitors, those are absolutely the best for singers, because you can specifically say, I only want to hear myself in my in-ears and maybe a little bit of the guitar. You can be very specific with what you hear. But again, over singing is one of the biggest traps of singing with a band. And if you can't hear yourself, you will oversing, you'll blow out your voice, you'll be hoarse, or you'll tire very quickly. And you don't want that happening, right? Okay. Number three, learn the lingo. There's a lot of lingo to learn for sure. So, the main important ones to learn are first of all, your monitor mix is what you hear. And if you're using monitors, which are speakers that are pointing at you, you're going to have one pointing directly at you. It might be that you only have two for the entire band. So you'll have to make sure that you're able to position yourself to the monitor so that you can hear it and share it with other people, but you can still hear yourself. The other important lingo is front of house mix or house mix. That's what is coming through the front speakers that when you're on stage, you're probably not going to hear. So you need to depend on your sound person to know what the front house mix sounds like and that it's good. So you may hear yourself very loud in your monitors, and the front of house mix might be a little bit more balanced where they can hear the singer loud and clear, but also everything else. That's ultimately the goal, right? Some more lingo would be in ears, which is just a monitoring system where you use like your iPods or whatever you call them nowadays, your little earplugs that go in that there's some that are specifically designed for singers and for musicians so that they're not plugging your ears, but you can still hear the outside or there's the right amount of air pressure. So those systems are pretty sophisticated and expensive. Usually bands, when they're first getting started, don't have those. And also it's good to have like a real sound person run in-ear monitors. Otherwise it can be overwhelming for a band to try and manage those in-ears as well as the mix that's going to the front of house. Okay, another lingo, your mic cable. It's not called a cord, it's a cable. And also, number 4, learn to wrap cables. That is something that's it's actually not hard to do, but it seems hard if you've never done it. And ask them at your first band practice. After you guys are packing up, see if you can say, "Hey, how do you wrap these anyway?" There's a specific way to do it so that you don't ruin the cables. And number 5, be helpful with hauling in and hauling out gear. You as the singer, you just have to show up. Sometimes you might have your own microphone that you'll bring, but a drummer, I mean, think about all those pieces of gear and hardware. That's about, 10 trips in and out. And then they have to set it up. So if you show up right as soon as rehearsal is starting, you're probably going to be showing up late. Everyone else has already been there 20 minutes before so they could get set up. You should show up 20 minutes before as well so you can help. Like, hey, I'm here to help. What can I haul in? And eventually you can start learning how to even set things up, like set up microphone stands, tape down cables, whatever you need to do. And this is also applicable for gigs. The last one I'll say, this is something that I just kind of thought of. It wasn't on my list originally, but it's something new. If you are not used to working with live microphones, some voice teachers, in voice lessons will have you work with a live mic, so you might already know this. But if this is the first time you're working with a PA system and a live microphone, just remember that pointing it at a speaker or your monitor that's usually pointing right at you is what will cause feedback. Another thing that will cause feedback is being too far away from the microphone. A lot of people, when they hear the squeal, they pull away, and that actually isn't going to help. Oftentimes, the feedback is coming because they're too far away. So, if you haven't worked with your teacher on mic technique, make sure you do that. But for an SM58, which is what bands are using in their live situation, they are meant to be pretty close to your mouth, almost touching. And if you get good mic technique where you can pull away a little bit when you're singing very loud, that's great. But most of the time, you're going to be right here, and make sure you're not, when you put your arm down, you're not like pointing it right at the microphone because you'll get some feedback. All right, I hope those tips were helpful. Be sure you grab your artist branding workbook so that you can create your vision, your unique artist brand that will help you stand out in the noisy crowd. See you next time.